So congratulations to everyone for entering. A pretty stunning selection of images in a variety of different styles and genres of landscape photography, or subgenres of landscape photography. So what we're going to try and do in the next sort of 30-40 minutes, if my laptop decides to play. Please hold caller. You can see my awesome background. Okay, as we're going to kind of run through briefly the competition and explain a little bit about that and try and elaborate on what the judges discussed, and then we've got 14 images from CPS members who've gratefully or generously loaned them to us to have a look at and discuss tonight. We're going to try and discuss those. So the main judges' comments, Tony gave quite a long discussion right at the start of his presentation, and this is my sort of abridged version of what he's talked about. He talked about a clear sense of space, a degree of intrigue or connection between the photographer and the landscape, or between the landscape and the viewer, but some kind of emotional response. Sorry? What was that? Okay. Elements that represent the essence of landscape photography, and in particular New Zealand, and then bringing something of the artist, so more than just simply being there. Ian, do you want to comment to some of those points?
No. Keep going.
All good.
Keep going.
Does that make sense to everyone so far? So that was the sort of pretext that they gave for the way that they looked at, or what they were looking for in the images. I thought it'd be a bit reasonably interesting to look at the stats from the last few years. So one of the interesting things about the Laurie Thomas is it is exceptionally hard to get an acceptance at Laurie Thomas. The acceptance rate in 2020 just snuck up to 21.8%, but generally it's below that, and 2021 only 11.6% of images were accepted, and that's accepted or awarded. This year, very, very similar, 18%. So the point to note here is if you managed one acceptance, you've done very, very well. You've beaten the odds on sort of 4 images. That's a 25% chance of one of them getting in. So they're looking for very small issues in images to make it over that threshold. If you've got into the acceptance, it's exceptionally good. And if you haven't made it into the acceptance category, that doesn't actually mean it's necessarily a bad image. It's just they found something that they didn't like, or they found something in another image that they preferred, and that's what made the cut. So don't be disheartened by no acceptances. They also gave quite a lot of tips, and I might try and get some of the others to discuss some of these. Cropping. Work out the crucial elements, or what is the hero in the image, and remove everything else. Ian?
I think one of the keys to this is remembering that the judges are trained photographers, in this case NZIPP judges, who've looked at a bajillion images, and anything that is just a little bit off or unusual or doesn't grab their eye and that's what he's talking about with cropping or straightening or technical, they will notice the smallest of things and they'll go move on.
Yeah, very much so. And the straightening of images, he mentioned it regarding horizons and keeping your horizons horizontal, and likewise verticals vertical if you've got trees or buildings in your image. But also I think this also applies to balance as well, and making sure that the image is weighted evenly. Mike, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, the point I'd probably make about straightening the images is even though your camera might be, might have a little level on it showing you that it's perfectly level, the landscape in front of you might not be. And so a river valley or something that's just got a very slight gradient on it can be quite distracting in the image, and you might find you actually need to play with that to make it visually appealing without altering the landscape.
Yeah, definitely. What someone is viewing is not what you're looking at in front of you when you're making the image. They also talked about technical issues with depth of field, focus and sharpness, and a lot of excess grain. And this is something that I think we can all be guilty of at times, is especially getting enthusiastic with processing images with some of the packages that we have available that can deliberately introduce grain. It can often create an image that is overly noisy, which may detract from the simplicity of the landscape. And vice versa on that one. If you have especially for low light photography and slightly older cameras, you can have images where you're trying to reduce the noise and you can reduce it too much so that the image becomes quite smooth. So same problem in reverse, effectively. A few more comments, the same sort of points there. Post-production, be careful of halos and glowing edges. I think we've got one example of that that we can point out, but often if you're trying to lighten dark foregrounds, watching out for creating a halo around the edge, or over-sharpening can do it as well. And take care with any cloning or masking. I didn't see anything in our example images that relates to that, but it's a relevant point. Obviously, in this competition, your cloning and masking should really only relate to dust spots and that sort of thing. Tony talked a lot about image depth. Ian, I'll get you to talk to this one.
Well, the simplistic form there is foreground, middle ground, and background. And the classic Ansel Adams F64, everything sharp from front to back, is one extreme of that. But I think there are other ways of building depth into the images with, the constructs of your compositions and any number of things. But I think the key is not leaving one of those three things essentially blank. And there's a number of images that have a big chunk of not much. And I think it's probably, think about what's in each of those components and make sure there is something significant. Don't score zero in any one part of the image is a key, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, do you agree? Yeah, and I find, and often with my personal photography, I find that often trying to find elements that link those three together to create some flow and connection through the image can be particularly difficult, and that's something that marks the difference in my own images of what really stands out and sometimes does or doesn't work. And then the tricky one, adding something of yourself. I've rephrased their notes here to talk about the boring meter. I can't remember whose phrase I'm stealing there.
Feel free to steal it.
There's a presenter who comes along to CPS quite often who talks about the boring meter, which is from waist level to head level, and trying to find a different camera angle or framing that presents the viewer with an image that they can't just see by walking along the same path. Using wide-angle lenses, telephoto, that sort of thing can make a big difference to showing the viewer what it is that you saw. And finding something unique in a common scene. I completely agree with that one. Go to these picturesque places, take the photo everyone else has taken, and then work out what really appeals to you and try and show that.
I think there's another comment you could use in the common scene, and that's like a common type of picture. There's a number of ICM flowy sea kind of pictures that have come through there, or a lone tree on a hill, and there's a whole bunch of cliches, the wrong word, but relatively common things to do. If you're going to do that, that's fine, but it needs to stand out a little and be clearly identifiable with your style and your way of doing things.
Yeah, the Wanaka tree being a classic example. Go stand somewhere else, try something different. And I just wanted to touch on this, and this is going to get controversial, and Ian and I are going to have a little bit of a fist fight shortly. The rules. I'm a bit of a stickler. I'm an engineer by training, so I'm a bit of a stickler for rules. And if it doesn't meet the rules, it gets biffed out. And that definitely applies in photographic competitions. If your image is too big for the comp sizing, gone. Likewise, if your image is too small, you're penalising yourself. So in this competition, CPS has gone up to the 4K dimension standards, so which meets, I think, with current club entries. If you submitted
38 something.
3840. My apologies.
Still 4K.
Yeah. If you've submitted an HD image or smaller, or the old 1620 by 1080, when the judges are looking at this, they're going to be looking at something that's a quarter the size on their screen. And if they blow it up, because their software is just fitting it to the screen, it's going to look much smaller. So my apologies, that'll just be my typo writing the numbers down. The Laurie Thomas landscape competition is for New Zealand images. It's not necessarily New Zealand photographers, but it is for images that depict the New Zealand landscape or the New Zealand colonies. Sorry, showing my English heritage. So all the
Dominion.
Yeah, all the outlying islands and everything are included. And the key one for me is no image manipulation that materially alters the landscape. It uses the same phraseology, the same wording as natural history or photojournalism competitions. And that gets particularly difficult when we reflect back on the previous what the judges were looking for, where they want you to add something of yourself into the image. So we get into quite a tricky, subjective area there.
And that's why the acceptance rate is so low.
Often people are trying to push the envelope, or So we're going to go through these images. Anything else you want to add, Ian, at this stage?
Nope.
No? We're going to go through these images. We're going to try and be constructive. Some of the images that we'll see have very minor issues or no technical issues at all. So we're getting into that subjective, it's three judges, they've picked what they like to some extent. And we'll start with this one, which is one of mine. So we'll pull this one to parts. This sort of epitomizes images, or the style of image that I quite like to make, but I think the main issue for me in this is around we can talk about that patch of foreground on the right there, but for me the issue is around foreground, middle distance and background. And you often see this in panoramic images where there isn't an easy link into the image. You tend to get quite a banded flow across the image. This might be a good one to consider cropping, where we take it into the two central trees and crop through the second patch of rushes there, to hone in on those three rocks in the foreground and the reflection and the trees in the background. For me, that was the image that I liked, which is why I made it.
Can you tell me, I'm not going to say this is what I would have done, because that's hardly...
You actually, I'm fine with us saying that sort of thing in this. I think that's a good idea.
But that's not what we want to do, but I'm interested to know why you elected to leave that think of shore on the right-hand side.
Yeah, it's tricky. Without it, I found that the image became too simple. It became a band. It was the foreground and the sky sort of almost became just a block of blue with this bar coming in from the right-hand side. And I quite enjoyed the trees. I didn't really want to crop just through that third tree along. So that was my decision for that, whether it's right or not.
It's valid. It's your decision.
Yeah. And I don't think that's worked with the judges. I don't think they've appreciated that. Hasn't come across as strongly as they might want. Mike, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I think that the challenge is, and as James has said, when you're shooting panoramas, often you're left with these bits of foreground that aren't a shape that particularly suits what you want to work with. But of course you're stuck with it because it's the natural landscape and we're not altering it to suit. So in some ways we're looking at the beauty of nature as it does what it wants, but the judge is looking for something above that. So I think had that little piece of foreground to the bottom right not been there, that might have let the image go further. I think the bit that's quite interesting for me are the three rocks in the foreground, which even perhaps shifting camera position to perhaps isolate those from the shadows behind or something like that might have worked in the context of having a smaller crop of that image or something along those lines.
Yeah, definitely. Does that make sense to everyone? Agree with that? Great. Next image.
Here we go. Something controversial. So this has got James wound up, so it's a great start. First of all, I want to make an observation about me sitting up here with these guys. I was 0 for 4 when it comes to the Laurie Thomas competition this year, and it's the first time I've entered for years and years and years, and as a rule I don't enter these sort of things. So for have me commenting with a couple of people who've won it or win these things sort of all the time is a bit odd. But anyway, I'm going to talk about it in the perspective of having been a judge in them, and partially that's why I don't enter them. The reality of the situation is you've got 3 judges who've got somewhere between 3 and 5 seconds to look at your picture and go yes or and if they go or 2 out of the 3 of them go that's it. That's the way these things work. This image, when I think about, I was just an idiot for putting it in because it actually breaks the rules. James thinks it literally breaks the rules by having a texture imposed on it. I think it breaks the rules because I've gone against the unwritten rule of celebrating the New Zealand landscape. That's what we're out about, celebrating the New Zealand landscape. I've found something harsh and, I'm really pleased with the picture. It portrays how I felt at the time really well. But what I've done is I've presented this to the judges who are looking to celebrate the New Zealand landscape, and I've given them ample opportunity to go, ooh, that colour's a bit odd, ooh, there's a harsh vignette, and what the hell's that texture? And to then just go, nah, next, and that's what they've done. So when you play this game, you have to play the game. So I'll probably just stop playing the game, or I'll think about it a bit more completely next time and play the game properly. The interesting thing about the textures is where we were discussing before. In a literal term, there was no texture in front of me, which is James's argument. My interpretation is I've added some shading in the form of a texture, which has made it a presentation of what I felt about what I saw there. Perhaps I should just enter different competitions is probably the conclusion.
That's probably the key point is, not every time that you press the shutter will you get a competition image, but your competition images will have their own time and place to shine as well. So you've really got to look at the competition rules that you're going into and make sure that your images are a fit for that. And if you're going to challenge the rules, make sure you're challenging within the boundaries that you're set. Because an image like this will have its place, but it's just not in the Laurie Thomas salon. But certainly other open landscape competitions, it would be seen in a totally different light.
Tell us why you hated it.
Yeah, well, I don't hate the image. There's only really 3 competitions that I still enter. the PSNZ National Exhibition, the Laurie Thomas Landscape Salon, and the Natural Photography Awards, which is a pure landscape photographic competition with basically the same rules as Laurie Thomas, and that is the style of photography that I most enjoy and where I get the most satisfaction. So there is definitely a place for interpretations of the landscape, and I feel that, and we'll talk about this. You can talk about this ad infinitum, and where we draw the lines with ICM and the recent kind of images where you have an ICM and a faster shutter speed image superimposed on top of each other of the same scene. They're definitely emotive images of the landscape, but I'm not personally, I don't feel that they meet the letter of the rules. So that's us two ripped apart. Hope that all makes you feel better. Mike.
Cool. So James made the point earlier in the introductory slides that the competition resolution is a maximum of 4K. So if the judges are presented with something smaller, and they've been looking at big images all day, and suddenly they see something smaller, you're really challenging them to put your one over the line. Whereas when you enlarge the image, and you can take note of all the detail that's in there, and the detail is certainly captured when you are talking about modern cameras with all the megapixels and sensor sizes they've got. So why not maximise the image for the judge to work with? For me, the challenge with this one here is that you're shooting in a location that hundreds of photographers stop at and photograph in these conditions. And we know that because they then cause accidents which close roads and the rest of it. So you've really got to work hard to find something different, and it comes back to putting your own unique spin on it. The hoarfrost, at the time that you photographed it, you've ended up with reasonably flat light across the whole scene, which doesn't help it sort of jump off the screen for the judges in that few seconds. If you'd sort of waited for the conditions, the sun might have come down and come through that high cirrus cloud out to the west, around sunset, and given you some nice golden light. Or if you'd been in the morning, you might have had fog to help give you some depth of field and help bring your eye through the image. It's just about being patient and waiting for those best conditions to make the most of the scene. Because it's an absolutely gorgeous scene, no doubt about it. And I didn't see too many other hoarfrost shots in the CPS submissions. So there is the opportunity to really have an image that the judges can easily latch onto there with just waiting for the right lighting.
The observation I'd make looking at that, if I was to write down what I'm seeing in this picture, I would be saying hoarfrost on the lake and a power pole. And it's the end of power pole that gives it a point of difference, but it's a negative point of difference. It's pulling my eye in that direction, and if it wasn't there, if it was cropped in, it would be just a lake or a nice lake, or the elements of the lake would work better. For me, that power pole is really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. I do like the shape that the cloud forms and the reflection of the cloud. Sort of, we get this kind of symmetrical kind of egg timer style shape. But yeah, I completely agree. You've done a nice job of getting the focus nice and sharp on that foreground and the background. And the only other thing I would say is the issue with resolution doesn't apply in print competitions. So actually, sometimes you can put in a very small print and it will be a more powerful image than blowing it up large. Oh, sorry. Before we move on, is the photographer here, and would you like to comment, Jen?
Just about being near and catching the light. The whole weekend was like that. There's no opportunity to use lighting. I wondered about the power even if I popped it in, it's not the clean that I saw it.
Yeah.
I would have, another suggestion, if you want to make a counterbalance with the power pylon, and it's a valid observation, is that it perhaps could be in a more prominent position within this frame. The way you framed it here, right on the edge, almost implies to me that you want to look past it, but my eye won't. You know, if you'd put it on a PowerPoint at a third or something like that, or in a more central position, where you're actually saying, not trying to say, hey, don't look at the power pole, you're saying, absolutely look at the power pole. I think that might have been a more effective way of telling that story. Just my call.
No, yeah, I agree. And also, when you have fairly flat light or sort of not much texture in the cloud, trying to reduce that element in the image so that you're either putting a hill in the background or using the hoarfrost of the trees as your backdrop to just remove that element from the frame could work. But that's trying different things, and we weren't there, so.
Yeah, but the other opportunity with lighting is to pull out a telephoto and look for the scene within a scene. Perhaps that might have led to doing something different with the power pylon as well. The trick with lighting in the landscape is you're not in the studio, so as you rightly said, you've got no control over it. You could have been there a week around. If that shot was from this year, and the fog didn't move and anything, and that leads to if you want that shot, you just have to keep going back in those conditions and wait for the light. So it's a real game of patience and luck.
Curves in Lincoln. Yeah, I'm a bit of a sucker for the golden yellow light and recessions, so there's a lot of appeal in this. For me, this is an image of two halves. The white lines of the power lines create such a dominant element in the frame, especially the little peaks along the bottom. And I find that the beauty of that, the soft recessions and that sort of, I'm guessing morning light, but hey, it doesn't really matter, golden hour light, that's competing with the strength of that high contrast foreground, and that's the bit that I struggle with. I get that that's kind of the point of the title of the image. In this case, I think maybe, yeah, from a landscape perspective, it's giving me a mixed message.
I'm thinking the same as I said before, make it more predominant. If it's about the power wires, which is, I completely agree with James, is that where the power wires sit here at the moment, they almost feel like they're trying to hide in the foreground, which you could make them do that by darkening the whole thing down legally. You could do that, but if they're part of the story, then get down a bit lower and force them up into the beauty and yellow bit and make the contrast between the gorgeous light and these horrible power lines the story.
Yeah, I've got nothing to add. As James said, there's two stories competing against each other.
John, are you here? John? Yeah. Would you like to comment? Just see him.
Yeah, it's understand what you're saying. I debated a lot about the power lines, to be honest, and I thought that I'm not from New Zealand originally, and I see the power lines in the landscape, and it's quite prominent everywhere you go. Look at power lines, they're a feature of the New Zealand landscape. Yeah. And because it was early morning and cold and power lines were curved, I thought, well, I'll make a feature of that and make that part of the story.
Yeah.
It was an idea I played with, and ironically, I actually emphasised the power lines a little bit more by making them stand out.
I don't know about making it worse, but it is that sort of 80% of the image is the recessions, and that the power lines in the bottom make for a sort of a mix. For me, it's a bit of a mixed message, and I think exactly as Ian said, yeah, trying to emphasise this sort of ugly industrial sense in a beautiful landscape. kick the viewer in the nuts with it and make the point.
Yeah, I think the power lines, I think the trick with them is that top one almost works. It clips slightly as it leaves the left-hand side of the frame. But yeah, the lower lines, they don't complete through the image. So just that fact that they're broken, it really does make you feel as if they shouldn't be there, as opposed to having, that beauty of a repetition or pattern that would suggest, that's exactly what you wanted to show us.
JT, thank you for sharing. Ian, over to you.
I've got nothing to say about this. I think I quite liked it. Panoramic form. I guess your foreground is relatively, there's not much foreground that leads you in, maybe from their talk. I looked at this one several times and went, what am I going to say about that? And came up with a conclusion that I quite liked it, and I have no idea. So.
I kind of think it suffers a little bit from not quite the same issue as mine, but what I was kind of hinting at with a lot of panoramic images, that we've got this banded structure rather than flowing through the image. It is quite noisy. You can see it up on the screen there. I don't know if you guys can from the back. And that might have been something that they picked up on.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I see when I look at this. It's a beautiful scene, and I think it's an opportunity to, again, get the telephoto out and lengthen your focal length to look for you've got some beautiful contrast in the clay cliffs against the green, the cliffs themselves with the different shades in the middle. So there's at least a couple of images there. But unfortunately with the panorama, there's quite a lot of grey, especially in that top right. Sort of most of the interest is on the left-hand side of that image. The other thing I might have done is not to harp on about power lines, but I'm not a fan of them in the landscape. So if I see them, I'll try and get rid of them. Just the fact there's that little one poking out the top, just get the camera down a bit lower or move a bit closer to the cliffs, just so you lose that from the line of sight, and that would just lift it up a notch.
Yeah, it's in a pretty dominant position, isn't it? That one.
Didn't realise it was a power pole till now.
John?
Interesting you say, I did use the telephoto, I did actually have another one which was more property.
Oh, at least you're consistent.
Anyway, probably the best little story one.
I'll just skip on that. So that's the resolution that the file came to me at. Mike, do you want to talk about this one? Yeah.
I think it's an easy one for me, in that the horizon's going straight through the middle of the frame, and so it makes it quite a static image. Whereas there's a lot of stuff happening in the sky with the cloud, and there's the waves and things, the surf bubbling across the stones, but you sort of got rid of that bottom part of the stones. It would perhaps make the image a little bit more dynamic, and help the composition, just to keep the judge there a bit longer.
I think the key to this image is at the end of Birdling, and underneath the hills where those waves are crashing and the spray's happening. That's where the picture is. And if you built it around that more strongly and got in a bit closer to that, I think there's a huge potential here. But like Mike said, half of it says the same thing. It's a great leading line that brings me up to where the picture is, but the relative proportion of picture to picture space is pretty small.
Yeah, and that the beach has got a nice texture in it, but there's not really any information that's for me that's filling in that story. So I think we've got roughly a quarter or a third of the frame is just that dark beach, and I think reducing that might help increase the strength of the breaking wave and the headland, and that nice kind of matching diagonal through the clouds that matches with the breaking wave.
Yeah, it's good to see you playing with the crop on it, because obviously you've shot something different to what the sensors captured with the 1:1. But maybe look at something like the 16:9 and try out a pano, that letterbox type format that would work with the middle part of the scene a lot better.
Would the photographer like to comment? If they're there? They're here? No? Alrighty.
These two.
Oh, Karen. Hands up anyone who's entered the National Geographic or the New Zealand National Geographic photo contest. A couple of us. So they have a really handy section in there, which is a guides about what to take photos of, and it's written by, I think, a previous judge, the editor. There we go. And pretty much the first thing it says is, it goes along the lines of, we've all seen sticks on beaches. And I think it's a really, really tricky thing, and my partner takes the piss out of me all the time for going, oh, a stick, I've got to take a photo of it. And they are really captivating. Unfortunately, they are just dead trees, and I think that's, for me, that's the issue with this image. I love the mist rising off the trees in the background and the soft tones. We see this kind of, it's a fairly flat light, but that can be tweaked a little bit. But for me, that stick is very, very dominant and isn't, or the tree trunk, and isn't an appealing element of the photo. It's not telling me, giving me an emotive part of the story. So that's the issue for me.
I feel it as a barrier. The vertical lines are a barrier to getting into the pictures rather than a leading staging post.
Yeah, I think when you see things like this, and if you're excited about shooting this sort of scene with the sticks and a calm reflection, is take practice shots and file it away, and then keep your eye open for sticks that are telling some other sort of story. So whether there's some sort of abstract shape in there that you can see, faces are a popular thing to try and find in the landscape. Keep looking for that subject that's got that extra bit that'll help with that sort of subject material.
Karen, do you want to comment? Yeah.
I was really trying, I just really like the scene with the sticks, because everything else I took that particular day just was really, really boring. I always thought that they added something to it, and to me that helped me lead through the photo.
Trying to use it more like an anchor to hold you in the image, and I mean, the composition. I mean, the composition is nice, and you've deliberately not broken through the sort of reflection with the sticks. But I think that's the fundamental issue: is it's a stick. Potentially, yeah. Or cropping through at the horizon of the lake, yeah, maybe, and just leaving some of the reflection, yeah, making it a sort of textural study, quite possibly.
I mean, the other thing you could do with an open competition is there's quite a lot of clutter in the sticks, so you could simplify it down to the central three that are quite vertical, and then remove the other elements if your sensibilities allow you to do such things. But obviously you can't for this competition, but yeah, it's something to bear in mind with an open.
Yeah. All right, we are getting a little tight for time. I'm conscious we'd need to push on, so we'll just move on briefly. Lucy Ferguson.
I'd quite like this as a 16:9 pano of the top. It's almost the fact that the little buoy in the middle is kind of a bullseye is powerful, but it's not the subject of the buoy is not strong enough to sit in that powerful space. And the foreground, there's not much in it. It's half the picture, and it's just a simple reflection getting to somewhere. I would happily crop it just underneath the reflection of the of the buoy out there, and I think the buoy would then be a foreground that leads us into the rest of it. That's how I see it, but you've obviously put it there for a reason. My point is that if it's in a strong, powerful, middle of the frame position like that, the reason has to be obvious, more obvious, and that then becomes a strong part of the image that it probably doesn't deserve to be, or maybe you didn't intend it to be, perhaps, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think Ian's right, and the way I'd probably approach dealing with the buoy on the scene would be to, I suspect the photographer's standing and taking the photo looking across the water surface, and the trick when you've got water that's rippled and windblown like that portion in the midground behind the buoy is to get the camera down to the water level so that you minimise that wind disturbance, you get your reflection, and also push the buoy up into the landscape on the foreshore, which you then do a nice little bit of burning and Photoshop or Lightroom to take the dominance of it away, so that you can look at the landscape rather than that.
For me, I think the issue in this one is primarily a technical one. The image is not actually sharp anywhere, and there's quite a lot of noise in it. So I think that's possibly also contributing to that. The busyness of the image and that central buoy has compositional issues. I think there's an issue with maybe leaving IS on your lens, or not having a tripod, or something that's caused it to be a little bit soft throughout. We'll just have to move on a little bit quicker because I don't want you to miss your AVs. So we've got 6 more, I think. Morning Mist, Paul Williams. Is Paul here? He's stuck in Methven somewhere. So I like the moody feel of this one, and the sort of that almost sort of cyanotype-y monochrome feel. For me, I think the fact that it's a double exposure effectively breaches the rules, and that's the main issue that I have with this image. I like the busyness and I like the textural feel, but I think that texture is a bit overwhelming, and for me that would be a breach of the rules. Ian?
Not going to comment on the rules. Yeah. If it does follow the rules, a big part of the interest for me is in the bottom part of the frame, but I really can't see it. And the mountain draws me past it. So I'm kind of drawn to the mountains, and I skip past the bit that I want to look at. That's what's happening that's what's happening to me when I look at it.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing the same thing as you, Ian, and when your eye goes to the bright bit in the snowy mountains, it's hard to come back down because you've got that horizontal line of the cloud passing straight through the middle of the frame, so it's hard to get back to that bottom part of the image.
Splitting it into 2 halves. Yeah. Richard Cooper's image. Mike. Oh yeah, well I'm happy to talk to this one. Yeah, it's actually showing significantly brighter on the projector than it is on my screen, and there's 2 issues I think with this that are primarily the technical issues. For me, it's a bit too dark, and especially the rock in the foreground. On my screen and on my screen at home, I see a very dark vignette, and there is no detail in that central rock. The other issue is the horizon, which is not straight. That's horizontal. So there is a minor. If I just quickly go over to Lightroom. No, can't do it. Yeah, there's in Lightroom, and I'm sure in all the other processing packages, there is an auto button on tone and exposure, and I find myself more often than not, I will try it on a lot of my images and just hit the auto button and see what it does. And in this image, it does a really good job of just bringing up the shadows a tiny, tiny bit, so you get detail into that rock, and it, without really affecting the beautiful sunrise colours there. And I think that's probably the issues for me.
Certainly that horizon felt off when I first saw it.
Yep. You guys agree?
Nothing to add.
Yep. Alrighty. Oops. We've got probably another 3 or 4 minutes to go. Mike, you can take this one.
Yeah, I think the Canterbury High Country is something that's photographed a lot, and I think for me, I'm just not seeing something unique enough to make this one stand out.
I think your observation about the height of the point of view on the water applies here as well. You know, you would get more of that rocky bit would go further out into the frame, I think, from that point of view.
Just by moving the position of the camera.
Move the camera down.
It's dropping down.
Yeah, I quite like I'm quite a big fan of looking through water at the reflections of the rocks, and I've tried it at not Wairepo, Ruataniwha a few times, and realised that actually it's really muddy down there and you don't want to see it. For me, the issue here, I think, is the image is over sharp, and it's very gritty and grainy, and there's a bit of a halo around Sugarloaf, which is also marking it down a little. It doesn't look too bad on Lightroom, but when you compare it to others, the sharpness just isn't quite there. Just a couple more. Oops. Oh. What's going on? Do you all know what the halo is when we talk about that? Adequately? Cool.
It's a good thing to, for those of you that use Topaz and other tools like that, there's a good argument for working with your image in Photoshop and learning layers and opacity, because you can certainly use the tool, like Topaz Sharpen or something like that, but often it overcooks it. But if you're working with it in Photoshop, you can reduce the opacity of that, so that you're still getting some benefit of it, but not the 100% of it. So you can work with your halos and things like that way by using a little bit, but not too much.
Using it as a smart filter, yeah, and superimposing, definitely. Okay.
This one, when I saw it on the computer screen, was again quite a lot darker than it's showing on the screen. And when I did that, it just felt 90% to be about that central tree and a little bit of golden, cloud behind it. And there was lots of supporting elements that just didn't contribute enough to the picture. Like the top of the sky is really quite dark. I imagine it's been darkened down to stop me visually escaping out the top of it, but it feels overcooked when I see the darkening in the frame.
Yeah, for me, I just find the foreground quite busy. So there is the central tree, but it's not quite big enough to keep me there. So my eye just keeps going left to right, left to right.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I like that, the silhouettes of the Nikos. I think it's kind of an interesting New Zealand feature. For me, I think possibly one of the issues here is the 18.1% acceptance. I think it's actually quite a nice image, and it does show something. But was it strong? Tony did also talk about sunrises and sunsets in his brief, and it's that sort of doing something with that. And I know NZIP are a bit anal about blocked blacks sometimes, so maybe they didn't like the silhouette concept as such a heavy primary element in the frame.
Again, brighter. When I crop the sky out completely, I really like this picture. The sky doesn't help at all. If you take that whole top bit out, my eye's not pulled up there, it definitely feels way brighter on the screen than it does on the printer screen, so it feels a bit over bright there, but it's really lovely light and it's gorgeous on the willow, the poplars and all that sort of stuff. It's just that sky just doesn't add anything to it. Crop it to a 16:9 and it's awesome.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree as well. And I think whether you choose to put the skyline in or not is it's an often neglected choice, and we often end up including sky when what it does is add another element into a frame, into an image, and it may not be necessary. But yeah, the lighting's beautiful, and the backlighting. And on my screen here, we're getting this gorgeous kind of line of sunlight cutting across the hills there, which is not coming out quite so well on the screen. But yeah, it's lovely lighting.
It'd make a lovely print.
Yeah, it would. And Joe's image to finish. Mike?
Just a minor technical thing. The main thing I noticed with this one was the sort of looks like there's been some noise reduction or something applied. It's sort of just taking everything slightly past where you want it to where the detail, and that's getting lost and starting to become a little bit sort of plasticky, perhaps. But other than that, it's a beautiful scene. I think the only other thing that challenged me a little bit is the fog in the top left that's lifting. Perhaps if we had a little bit more dark above it just to hold that down. The half doesn't quite work for me here. It just needs to be slightly one way or the other.
I really liked it. I think a grungy texture over it, and it's awesome.
Cover it in wax. I think, yeah, I agree. I agree with Mike's comments. The rising mist there is quite a dominant eye kind of hook. The only other thing for me in this one is running your eye around the edges. So top right and bottom right, those two little corners have little lighter patches. And actually removing those, just that, even if you obviously you can't clone a few more trees in, but that's a little drag for my eye that pulls me up into the corners of the frame. That's all the images. I'm sorry we've overrun a little bit. I hope that everyone found that useful. Noel, questions?
Can I just make two?
Of course. Let me pass you a microphone.
One, I am the author at CPS of the term the boring meter. It's stolen from Dave Wethy for photojournalism. That's just for your interest, who invented the boring meter, and it simply means you don't shoot from anything between your waist and the top of your head. Step up on something. But the real thing I want to make here is that the picture that was given the first prize is not a landscape. No, it's not a seascape either. I have files of discussions going back since we invented this competition 25 years ago. And we asked people like Matheson Beaumont at that time, how would you define a landscape? We had John Boyd involved in it too. And I've still got correspondence with those guys. And to be a landscape, it needs to have a land form in it, some land in it. Whereas the winning image here, lovely as it was, and we heard the virtues of that image and how it looked like a Murray cloak and so forth, there was not a scrap of landform anywhere. It was totally without landform, and so it really wasn't qualified in my estimation. Doesn't mean to say that my picture should have been included, because that wasn't either. but no, it's got to be a landform. It's got to have some land.
It's an interesting point, especially when you refer it back to the rules, of which there are only really 3. It's an image of the New Zealand landscape that epitomises New Zealand. So that's where, and I think kind of hopefully what we've demonstrated here is we've had 14 images, and we are really nitpicking about what makes what may or may not have been the acceptance level, and it comes down to 3 different photographers who have picked their favourite images at that time. It's not necessarily anyone else's top favourite images, and it's something spoke to them or didn't speak to them. So hopefully that's been useful. Hopefully there's something that we can all take away in terms of editing and evaluating our own images. And thank you all for listening.
Oh, do they? I hope everybody enjoyed that. That was great. Learned a lot, and I have to make sure. Are we going to have a short tea break, stretch our legs before we get on with the next half? So I've got a few announcements to make. So, sorry? 8:30? Yeah, you've got 15 minutes to go to the toilet, stretch your legs, and grab a drink, and then head back in here, please. Thanks.
talk. Talk.
Hello. I think we might make a start. So you can bring your cup with you and sit down, and just remember to take your cup back afterwards. Excuse me, ladies. Ding, ding. Those in the naughty corner, please. Thank you. I think because we're running a bit tight tonight, so I think it might be a good idea if we get started. Well, that was great, valuable insight from our three judges tonight. So I think we've all learnt a bit going forward for future competition in the Laurie Thomas. Now, as you know, recently there was a Selwyn photographic competition and display of photographs run by Mike White and Rachel O'Carroll. Sorry. I don't know if any of you got down to see that. It was excellent. I know a few people did. But Mike has got, wherever he is, he's hiding, a presentation to make. If you'd like to pop up, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks everyone who made it down to Te Arawatia for the exhibition. We've had, I think we had over 1,000 people through in the last couple of weeks, so it's pretty cool for those of you that got to share your photography and do the workshops and things. But everyone that came through, or a good number of them, got to vote for their favourite image. So it's quite cool that our People's Choice Award is also a member of CPS. So we have a wee prize pack from Canon and a wee certificate for Gunda's Bort for her Devil's Punch Bowl print. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Gunnar. That was a fabulous image. Congratulations. Just before we continue with our AV judging tonight, the PSNZ photojournalism competition closes on the 31st of July. If you've got anything you'd like to enter, you need to go to the PSNZ website. The monthly digital comp closes on the 31st of July, and the topic is P, so please enter your image on the CPS site. The projected image 8 closes 16th of August, I believe. I didn't check, but I believe that's correct. This weekend, of course, we have the Laurie Thomas School at, no, I'm going to say this correctly, Omarama, is that correct? Yes. Yes, is that right? Oh, okay, well, I'll try anyway. Thank you. Kindly organised by Heidi, who I don't think she's not here tonight. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of you there. And hopefully we have some snow or frost or something on those lines. That's what I'm hoping for. So if you're driving down, drive safely, and I'll see you there. Now, also, just wanted to draw attention to the NZIPP conference that's being held in Christchurch in August. And prior to this, the Iris Awards are on, which is the judging of the professional images in many categories. These judging sessions are open to the public. So if you want to go and watch, you can do. I have the schedule with me here, if you want to take a screenshot of it. So if you're interested in nature or weddings or portraits or landscapes, you can find out when they're being judged and go along and watch. It's at the Majestic on Durham, which is, I think, the modern church in the city. So just come and see me afterwards if you want to take a photo shot of that. There's also the photography trade show on that Friday night at 6:30. That's open to everyone as well, with all the major brands and suppliers being there. So you might see something that you want to spend some money on. So again, you're able to go to that if you wish. And that can be found on, I think, by just Googling the NZ Photography Trade Show. It should pop up, or on Facebook. And I think that's all I have to say, and so we'll hand you over to our judge for the... Oh, are you going to talk about... Thank you, John. Didn't see you hiding there. You can come up and I'll go.
Slide behind you.
Oh.
There we go.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to the 2023 CPS AV competition, where you get to show more than 3 images in one night, the sort of music that you like. We also have an audience award tonight, so applaud loudly. My new phone will be recording while you do that. As a competition secretary, sometimes you get entries that do not quite fit within the rules. We've got one entry tonight which falls into that category. However, we do like to see our members' art, so let's play. And I think also this entry demonstrates the power of the video mode in your camera. So let's play entry number 2 there, Alistair.
Spoiled land comes the pure and natural taste of New Zealand butter. Anchor, the taste of New Zealand. It's in the butter.
And tonight's show is sponsored by Anchor Butter. And I'm sure it's been seen by millions of people, probably millions more than mine will ever be seen by. Okay, can we play the next audio-visual? This is...
I attended a judge accreditation weekend in Auckland way back in 2013. I found it was inspiring and it taught me many different ways to re-examine my own photography as well as that of other people. I followed that up with a second judge accreditation weekend in late 2014. Yes, once again, hooked. I signed up for the training and heart and mouth asked Bruce Girdwood if he would be my mentor. I have huge respect for Bruce's imagery and his approach to life. I knew he would challenge me every step of the mentoring journey, and he did, and I was able to challenge him in return. So the judging journey became official as of February 2016, and I have very recently also achieved accreditation for AV judging. Which brings me, in a roundabout way, to my true love, audiovisuals. As said, I made my first, Chasing Demons, inspired by the confrontations I made with and within myself on a full week in Wedderburn. The process of creating that AV was cathartic. Here is my opening sequence. I enjoy that AVs allow me to play with stop motion as a means of expression too, and from the 8 images used in Chasing Demons, I graduated to a 27-image stop motion sequence for the second AV I made, Mad World. For me, the primary motivation to create an AV is having a message or experience to convey. It is a personal experience that becomes shared when you allow an audience to view it.
And that was an AV by Karen Lawton, our judge tonight, who did an excellent audio-visual tutorial a few weeks ago. Can you please welcome Karen Lawton to the stage? Thank you. I think so.
That works?
Yep.
It's working? Oop. Thank you. It's really, really hard listening to yourself speak on an audio-visual like that. Made quite a few years ago. Okay, thank you again for allowing me to critique your audio-visuals. Just a quick little reminder of what audio-visuals are about. Predominantly still images. Typically video will not take more than about 20% of your AV time. And I'm looking, in terms of critique, I'm looking for 3 items. One is the development of a theme or a concept or thought which works logically through your audiovisual, typically with an introduction so that your audience knows what's going on. your image quality has to be really good. It's not a place to throw images that you sort of think are okay. Personally, I think that your images should stand alone as images that you would enter into a competition. And your audio needs to be well constructed, it needs to support the concept, and it needs to work with the images. It's a supporting act. And those are the three factors that I was looking at when I reviewed your images, your audio visuals. We're already quite late, so we're just going to keep it short and sharp, and if you'd like to play the first one, that would be great. Thank you. I know I've signed the certificates, but I'm going to revise that award for this one. John, are you listening?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, good. Okay. It certainly told the story of AMP shows that we've no doubt all been to over the years. It introduced its intention really well. The images that I enjoyed the most out of what was there were the animal portraits, the dog, the goat with its head out. I thought that they told the story more personally than perhaps observational pictures of people sort of hanging about. It certainly showed all of the facets of AMP shows that we often love. Simple transitions, perhaps a little bit too quick. Maybe if you let the images fade a little bit more, it would feel a little bit less jerky. I think there was an opportunity there to overlay sounds about what was going on. You had the wood cutting, for example. if you are able to record that, or if you were even perhaps able to add a little bit of stop motion or a bit of video in there to show the action of what was actually happening there, may have enhanced what you came up with. Opportunity to use more camera movement you did with the ride, and that was quite cool. AMP shows are about movement and fun, and perhaps using different camera techniques would have enhanced that story. I like the conclusion of it, the ribbons, and yeah, it flowed well. Originally on that certificate it says acceptance, but I'm bumping that one up. Thank you. Was that high acceptance, is that right? Yep. Yep, thank you. Very clearly about beauty. I found that to be very restful, and that's largely in part to the audio that you chose, which is a favourite old song. And you've got the dawn to dusk construction as well. I like the simple transitions. I found that the ones that wiped diagonally across the screen were a little bit fast. and a little bit just either down or up, a little bit disconcerting. I think if you made the transition time a little bit longer, it may have not been quite as disruptive as I found it. Landscape, but some of the images were wider. I don't know how you fix that, because I've had that problem as well. So I like the fact that they were predominantly the same orientation and predominantly really good quality images. So it was restful. I think you could have told that story in less time. It's really hard not to. You don't want to beat the audience over the head with too many similar images. It's a very restful, simple story, and it was 3.5 minutes-ish. You could have told that story in 2.5 minutes, in my opinion. So maybe whoever made that might want to go back and just trim it a little bit, and therefore get your story across quicker and keep your audience engaged. I gave that an acceptance. Nice bit of applause. Great concept. I loved the idea and the way it was conveyed, the mix of video and stills. Those both got really big ticks, and the fact that it was really short and sharp and got the story across. There were some beautiful images in there, and I thought, and a very logical time sequence. I would encourage you not to ever use continual movement on the images. That was always going either out or forward. Just let an image sit there so that people can look at it and enjoy it, rather than wondering where it's going to zoom off to. I found that disconcerting. I don't know if the rest of you did. I think if the AV maker went back and changed the way that they presented those images and just let some sit there and let the beauty show, you would have a far more powerful outcome. Highly not commended, high acceptance.
In the frigid north, where snow falls deep and the winds of winter howl and sweep, there are creatures strong and true who brave the cold to pull us through. Amidst the icy tundra's sprawling white, a team of dogs with eyes so bright, their barks echo through the snowy night as they pull the sled with all their might. Majestic creatures with fur so thick, built for this land, they never quit. Their paws move swiftly, never slip, as they journey through snowdrifts so thick. They are more than just mere beasts of burden. Their strength and loyalty cannot be forgotten. They are companions with hearts so certain. Their bond with their human is unbroken. Through frozen rivers and mountain peaks, they brave the elements, never weak. Their howls pierce the silence, so bleak, as they race towards the finish line's peak. These sled dogs are truly a sight to see, a testament to the beauty of this land so free. With each step they take, they remind us to be as brave and fierce as they in our journey to be free. With a howl that echoes through the icy air, the Alaskan sled dog takes off without a care. A blur of fur, a flash of speed, a creature of power, built to exceed. The snow and ice is their domain, a landscape that they know without a strain. They pull with strength, they pull with might. With every stride, they take flight. Their eyes gleam with an inner fire, a burning passion that never tires, a fierce determination that never dies, a will to win, a will to rise.
Again, great story, great concept. I had the giggle about ChatGPT, whatever, when I got to the end as well, because that explained why some of the rhyming was so twee. Sorry, Ian. Anyway, I really liked the way that the barking was overlaid so that you got the real sense of being there, and the appropriate use of the video clips. It had a logical dawn to duskish type construction and simple transitions, so technically I thought it all hung together. I would encourage the maker to revisit some of the wording. I only know whose it is now because I've signed the things. Some of it was just a little bit like, I thought, oh, who wrote this? So that's why I have given this a high acceptance. Thank you. This AV caused me a lot of angst because I didn't know how to respond to it, and I wasn't quite sure how to be positive about it. And if the AV maker is here, I'm going to start off by saying that this is not accepted. It's not accepted because of the audio. As I said at the start, the audio needs to be a supporting actor. It needs to be behind your images. It needs to help you tell the story. And in this case, being almost beaten over the head, was it only 4? I thought it was 5, 4 times by the national anthem in a dirge-like kind of state was, it didn't work. The second time I watched it, I had to not listen to the sound. So apologies to the maker. There are some very worthwhile images in there, and there are opportunities that you could have used to make that far more multicultural. There was kapahaka, there was the people in the waka at the start. There was lots of opportunities to overlay the sounds of New Zealand's National Day. Probably the less said the better, so that's not accepted. I enjoyed the construction of the AV, the tale of effectively a day, and the beauty of the scenery. Photographs involving the people made it quite personal, so it told a personal story. It felt like you had this many images to put into this much time, because all of the transitions were very quick, and it meant that I didn't get to explore any of the particularly interesting landscape photos. So if you were looking at rejigging it, lose some of the images, chop it down to 3 minutes, not 5 minutes, and concentrate on the ones that really, really tell that story. It was just like boom, boom, boom. You couldn't really concentrate on what was on the screen, I thought. There's a part somewhere around about a minute 50. You've got, I think I counted 9, I might be wrong, when the images go portrait of an empty path. You could tell that story of an empty path with 2 images, maybe not 8 or 9. So just because you've got the images, don't feel obliged to put them in. I don't even know if the fungi belonged in there. I can see why you put them in, but I don't know that they added to the full story. It certainly conveyed the location well, and the weather, and the variety of activities. I think you've got the basis for something worth revisiting and refining. Acceptance. the last one, isn't it, John? Yep. That's right, okay. Although that was only a little bit over 3 minutes, it felt a bit longer, I think, because for me, watching or hearing about somebody else's party is never as good as being there, you know, and these people were having fun, but we didn't get to get face-to-face images very often. It felt observational. People were drinking and laughing and having fun. It was almost like listening to the landscape critique, an AV of two stories. One, you know, people with beer and whatever in their hands. The other story was about the horses and the players. And perhaps there was an opportunity just to concentrate on the game rather than the product placement and the audience. I thought the audio fitted it. That's cool. I found the transitions a wee bit quick again. I guess you were conveying the feel of the audience and the excitement there. Again, observational. Using an event as a theme, just gets back to the fact that if you're not there, it's really important to convey the excitement and the movement and perhaps some additional sounds overlaid. So it introduced the premise, it had a logical progression, relatively short runtime, those are all ticks. It's just difficult when you're trying to convey the excitement of a one-day event to people who weren't there. And perhaps you'd like to rethink the construction and make it all about the horses and the players. So I gave that one an acceptance as well. Can I make a quick conclusion? I think that there's a fair bit of potential in what was presented. I wonder if the club would like to consider right, here's your AVs, bring them along to a critique before entry. Get along somebody other than me, or just talk amongst yourselves and look at them and say, okay, how can we improve those? What do you get out of this story, and how can this audiovisual convey that more effectively to an audience that really knows nothing about what you're talking about? Whether you want to stage that a month or so before your competition, it's a great learning experience, and you learn best from your peers. Just an idea. And again, thank you for the opportunity to give you my opinions. Thank you.
Modified the one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thanks, Ruth. Is that working? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks very much, Karen, for your insightful comments, and I'm sure we all learnt something. And I know we've had tutorials before on how to make an AV, but I guess the difference between tutorials and art of an AV, I suppose, is where you try to, perhaps audience participation could help. You know, I'm not really sure, but I'm sure we could all improve somewhere along the line. Anyway, we've got some awards here. The first acceptance is Autumn Colour by Diana Andrews. Is she here? No, I think she might be on the road somewhere. Next up is...
Do you want me to come down?
Oh, that might be a good idea. Yeah, thanks. The next up is Nelson Lakes National Park by me. Oops, nearly dropped it. Jeez. It's been one of those weeks or fortnights. We've got an acceptance for Urban Polo by Tash Harris, LPSNZ. We've got a high acceptance for Kelly and the Camera by Brian Hay-Bittle. There? No, on the road as well, probably. A high acceptance for the Alaskan Sled Dog by Ian Walls, FPSNZ.
my shots were good.
And you also won the Audience Award.
Oh, thank you.
So don't drink it on the way home, though. And a promotion for Jan Bogue for AP ANP show, High Acceptance.
Oh.
I didn't bring my felt pen. Oh, well, something special. There's a promotion on the night. Yeah, well, thanks very much, Karen, for judging that. I know it's not easy being a judge. And please accept this on behalf of the club.
Thank you, and you can accept it.
Oh,
I'll put it down here.
thanks very much. And thanks, Alistair, for doing the video projection. And Andrew down the back there. Anyway, thanks so much, Karen.
Thanks. Thank you, Karen. That was great. One day I might actually get my act together and do an AV. I have some ideas, but don't know about putting one together. Has anybody got anything they'd like to add tonight? Any special message you have? You're just up here.
Thank you to those who entered.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. Anything else? Yes, we've got a couple of hands going up.
We've still got the MDC if you want to run it tonight.
Tonight. How does everybody feel? MDC? Yes? Yes? Okay. Yes? Okay. Right. Sorry about that. I didn't realise it was on tonight. Gosh. Okay, some interesting images there. Great interpretation.
Number one goes to John Hawkins, but he's not visible tonight, I don't think. So we'll try for the second place, who is John Ben. He's here.
Do I get the chocolate fish now?
You get the chocolate fish, John. And you can determine our pain for next month. Just remember, P closes on the 31st of July. Is that Monday, is it? Is it Monday? Yeah. Number between 1 and 7. 5. And then a number between 1 and 31. Oh, sorry, 30.
20.
20 is repetition. Repetition is the theme for next month. Thank you very much, everybody. We look forward to your P entries by the end of the month.
Thanks, John. Okay, I don't think there's anything else unless anybody... No? Okay, well, just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And who have we got at the back? We've got Wayne and Andrew, EA, and Alistair on projection. I don't know who was on meet and greet, but probably Dennis. Anybody else I've forgotten? And John tonight for the supper. And Dennis, of course, as well helped with that. And thank you all for coming. See you next week and drive home safely.